First of all, before we start, I would really like to present our honored guest of this evening, which is His Excellency, the Ambassador of Ukraine here in Sweden. So I want everyone to meet the ambassador. Of course, you may have the opportunity to talk to him a little bit later if you can find him in the mass of people in the break. So I'm very honored to have you here. And that said, I think it's a very important time. We need to understand that from the Ukraine perspective. And in Sweden, we sometimes have a hard time to understand the vast reality of a bad scenario in the future. Ukraine is in the middle of war. Viktor Zhora, our keynote, who I soon will invite to the stage, his team are fighting on an everyday basis to defend this infrastructure of the country from a cyber perspective. But both His Excellency and the Ambassador and Viktor Zhora's countrymen, they're fighting for their lives. People are dying, including civilians and children. So I think it's very important and an important message to everyone here. In this time, we need to support Ukraine. So I urge every individual and every organization represented in this room to think about Ukraine and do something that you can be proud of in the future. Because when you think about it, this time it is Ukraine. In the future, it could be Sweden or another country. So that said, I'm honored to welcome Viktor Zhora to the stage. He will share his insight from the security domain defending his country. Welcome on stage.
Good up. I'm extremely happy and excited to speak to such great and honored audience, and thank you so much, Marcus, for inviting me, and thank you to Truesec for gathering the audience and inviting me to tell about how cyber warfare is provided against our country as a part of hybrid warfare. How is it combined with the conventional war and kinetic operations against our country. And I'm extremely pleased to be joined by His Excellency Ambassador of Ukraine, Andriy Plakhatnyuk. And at the same time, yesterday, and I want to congratulate everybody with the National Day of Sweden, His Excellency Ambassador of Sweden to Ukraine visited some Ukrainian towns around Kiev, particularly Velika Dymerka, the town where Coca-Cola plant was situated, and it was partially destroyed. And he visited this location in order to witness the destructive character of this unprecedented and unprovoked war of Russia against Ukraine. And there are several versions of how this war was initiated. And the first and obvious version, it started on 24th of February. But let's recall what happened eight years before, with the annexation of Crimea and the occupation of eastern part of Donbass. To many opinions, that was the start of war. Or somebody even think that it happened 4 centuries ago. But nevertheless, with regards to cybersecurity domain, we can consider the start of cyber warfare in May 2014 with the attempt to interfere Ukrainian elections. And that was an attack on Central Election Commission and its IT system. And it was later followed by the number of severe and unprecedented cyber attacks on Ukrainian critical infrastructure and government agencies. The first attack on power grid in history, which happened in late 2015 and was followed by a more sophisticated attack in late 2016. Attacks on Ukrainian media, attacks on government entities, including Ministry of Finance, including state treasury, attack on Ukrainian transportation like airport Boryspil or Ukrainian railway, and finally the most destructive cyber attack in history called NotPetya, which happened on 27th of June 2017. And as we know, it affected not only Ukraine, while 75% of targets were located in Ukraine, but it impacted with collateral damage 25% of targets outside Ukraine, including global companies like Maersk, Mondelez, and many others. So, Ukraine served as a kind of testing ground for cyber weapon for these 8 years. But this cyber weapon and cyber operations then were used in other countries, targeting democracies, targeting elections, and targeting global companies, which became a victim of these illegal cyber operations from obviously state-associated actors. We used this time, this comparatively calm 4 years, to concentrate on strengthening our cybersecurity. Actually, we are forced to build it from scratch. We developed our cybersecurity strategy. We developed law and basic principles of cybersecurity. We created a number of agencies and divided responsibilities between them, and now our cybersecurity system consists of 10 responsible agencies, including mine, the State Service Special Communications and Information Protection of Ukraine. Now, I'm a deputy head, and I'm responsible for digital transformation and for cybersecurity projects in the country. And our service has 94 functions, including secure communications for country leaders, including delivery of secure email or broadcasting the TV signal and many others. And last but not least, we developed and implement country's policy in cyber protection. So we are responsible for state information resources and for critical information infrastructure. And then, after these 4 years of allowing us to be prepared to escalation, nevertheless, we recorded continuous growth of cyber incident and cyber attacks over this period. We faced new kind of attacks that happens on 14th of January. Of course, we understood that the war is approaching, and the signs of information that we get from intelligence and from our partners, of course, convinced us that we should prepare for a big war. We should prepare to defend our country and in cyberspace as well. And we started cooperating more intensively with our critical infrastructure, particularly with energy sector, even in the end of previous year. But it happened on 14th of January when government websites were attacked. They've been defaced, and the vipers were used to destroy infrastructures, data in government agencies. Some manual operations have been done to disrupt services for Ukrainian government and some of associated enterprises. We understand that it looks like a disruptive attack, but its objective was to sow panic, to sow disinformation and instability, to convince that Ukrainian government has nothing to do with such a kind of attacks, and it cannot protect citizens' data in state registers. But nevertheless, we succeeded with recovering our infrastructure for less than a day for 90% of all victims. And we understood that this is a sign of war that approaching, that will come soon. And this attack was later followed by a number of huge DDoS attacks, which impacted our financial sector, 2 biggest Ukrainian banks. Again, as a part of information psychological operation, a part of preparation to war, which this cyber operation preceded the invasion, which happened on 24th, and then the last hit was on 23rd. Again, huge DDoS attacks and tried to penetrate government networks and try to steal some data from them. And we were very busy on this particular day, but having in mind that something bad could happen in the next few hours, and it did. But again, it was preceded with an attack on satellite network called Viasat, or its subnetwork KSAT, which aimed at disruption of communication of Ukrainian armed forces. So it didn't impact the coordination of armed forces since it was a backup channel of communication, but nevertheless, the idea was to disrupt communication for Ukrainian army and for government entities. But again, it had collateral damage, since the satellite modems were targeted not only in Ukraine, but in Europe, and it affected some wind generators. So we can consider this as a kind of a cyber attack on other countries, and by the way, NATO countries. And it was followed later, 2 months ago, 2 months after this attack, by a statement of 27 states, which officially recognized Russia as a cyber aggressor. You can assume that we were extremely busy in these first days of war instead of collecting dumps and evidences of this attack on Viasat. But nevertheless, we were provided with a number of facts that convinced us that basically Russia stood behind this attack. It's not a difficult thing to understand who's responsible, but we need to have these evidences. We always were very accurate in providing attribution, since we understand that it's a very difficult and responsible thing to attribute, since it has some political consequences. But this fact of cooperation between different states and gathering of proofs that allowed to provide this attribution is a unique thing, and it's very important that that was done officially for future understanding who stand behind the majority of cyber attacks in the world and who stood behind previous attacks. And the United States were the first country to provide this official attribution to Russian hackers, and we understand that the Russian military hackers are responsible for this majority, and we continue to witness the activity. These APT groups, which are basically military officers of GRU, of FSB, of SVR, of Ministry of Defense, that are hidden behind these APT group names like Sandworm or Fancy Bear APT28, or Armageddon, and many others. They continue their illegal activity. Now focusing mostly on Ukraine, of course, and I will explain later why, but we observe the activity globally in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in European countries. So back to Ukraine and back to cyber war in Ukraine. We see that some of cyber operations support military operations, as it happened in some regions. For example, in Lviv and Odessa, after hitting these cities with shells and missiles, some local government websites were attacked. On the other hand, some of these attacks continue to be separated. So they are partially coordinated with kinetic operations and partially not. And they continue to focus on our critical infrastructure. During the first months of war, we recorded triple time growth of cyber incident comparing to the same period of the previous year. And up to the moment, from the beginning of war, we recorded 688 cyber incidents with, and perhaps 15% of severe. So this is kind of escalation of aggression that supports Russian military operations. And during first months of war, we didn't see very sophisticated attacks, for obvious reason, basically. You don't need to hide behind anonymous proxy and use this stealth technique of targeting other countries in cyber when you have your missiles that can hit Ukrainian residential quarters, hospitals, schools. And in this understanding, these cyber operations are supportive. But they can be separated to provide intelligence. And we believe that the attack, which I mentioned on 14th of January, has an objective to get some data from Ukrainian register to use this data on Ukrainian citizens for later operations, for infiltration, for funding some interesting people, foreign occupants on occupied territories, for example, Ukrainian military servants or civil servants, or those who participated in defending our country, Donbass, over the last 80 years. So this kind of operation were not sophisticated, but later they used this period to prepare for more, and they started more sophisticated operations like attacks on the Ukrainian telecom sector, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and finally targeting our energy sector with a brand new malware code called Industroyer 2, which was modified after its use in 2016. So it was intended to provide a blackout in a single region for up to 2 million people. And this gives us an understanding that most of attacks continue to target civilian infrastructure, not military targets. Civilian infrastructure, government entities, financial sector, energy sector, telecom infrastructure, supply chains, and even charities that are helping Ukrainian citizens to survive in these challenging conditions. How we counter these threats? First of all, we were able to hire highly qualified professionals to our service and to armed forces. They are helping us to provide more defense to our networks. And we were joined by a huge number of volunteers, Ukrainian and foreign volunteers that are helping us as well to resist. And we get a lot of help from our partners, from governments, from organizations responsible for cybersecurity in these countries, and from private business, from global IT providers that help us with software, with hardware, with threat intelligence, with cloud infrastructures, with consultancy. And we are thankful, we appreciate this help, and this allows us to be resilient in this cyber war. And I would love to use this opportunity to thank Sweden for helping Ukraine, not only with supplying of weapons and for political and economical support, but also in cybersecurity. And I hope our cooperation that is establishing will be beneficial for two countries. Since we have this visibility and we have this experience of combating cyber threats in real time during the war, and I'm confident that we can contribute to global cybersecurity ecosystem with this knowledge, to European cybersecurity system, to NATO cybersecurity system, and to be an active participant of a community of countries with responsible behavior in cyberspace. And that is the first opportunity for me to leave the country for 104 days of war. And I'm glad to be here, but first of all, we visited Tallin and Brussels, and Ukraine was invited as a contributing participant to NATO CCD COE Center in Tallinn, and we participated for the first time in steering committee. That means that we become closer to cooperation, and we can benefit from access to knowledge base, from access to technologies, and we can exchange information more effectively with such opportunities. And we were in Brussels. We met with EU officials, and we understand that perhaps we did not enough to previously to prepare for this global cyber war. But nevertheless, with the help of our partners, we were able to strengthen our cybersecurity capacities, to prepare workforce, to adopt our legislation, and many, many other things. And we understand that cybersecurity is not about people, technology, and processes, but we try to manage with these three domains, but also about cooperation. And this cooperation, since cybersecurity is a global task, is crucial. I will give an example how it happened in Destroyer 2 attack. We stated it publicly, and I mentioned that we provided with a lot of threat intel, but that was from Microsoft and ESET companies that informed us of potential threat for energy company. And we contacted them and convinced that it wasn't a false positive. So we used this opportunity to quickly indicate the threat and promptly provide response to it. That was the exact example and very good example of cooperation between private sector and public sector, and cooperation between companies. And considering that this was a very serious threat to Ukrainian critical infrastructure, and I believe every country can be threatened with such kind of attack. We succeeded in prompt mitigation of this attack. So again, cooperation is crucial, and I believe that lessons that we carry out from this war will probably change the global order in cybersecurity, since we know who, we know how, and we know for what are the purposes of it. And purpose, obviously, is disinformation, is attack on critical infrastructure, is support to military operation, and all the same to change global order. We should prevent this, and no doubt Ukraine will prevail in this war with the help of our partners. But we should concentrate on providing technological sanctions to the aggressor, financial sector, to limit their ability to attack others. And of course, we will be very grateful for providing other ways of support to Ukraine to be able to continue defending our country, defending the values of democracy, and defending human rights and our right for independence and sovereignty. Tak, дякую. Thank you so much for your attention.
I will spend just a few minutes before I get our moderators back on stage just to give some Swedish perspective on the Swedish future. And I really find it difficult because the Ukraine situation is so much more severe than anything we're facing in this country. So in general, I think our support now should be with Ukraine, but then later there are a lot of learnings from what's happening in Ukraine. And we have the same antagonist that is a threat to our country that is stated in our government documentation, especially around the NATO situation before we decided to apply for NATO membership. And we do need to understand from where we are standing that cyber is one component in a very capable nation-state actor that is not sharing the interests that we share. So we shall be prepared for the potential use of cyber in order to affect the outcome of our NATO application. One logical way forward could be to invoke fear in our society. I'm not saying it will happen, but we need to have defense capabilities around that, both psychologically and technically. I think that is important. We also have an upcoming election in Sweden this year, in September. And Russia have proved or have been attributed to have meddled with the elections in Ukraine. Again, there's a lot we can learn from the election 2014 that Victor mentioned, where they actually tampered with the systems of the election machines. So cyber is a threat of today. Another thing Victor mentioned is that you're not strong when you're alone. There's a lot we can learn from that in Sweden. Sometimes we fight over crumbs, or we have prestige between the private sector and the government sector, etc. Their entire success, the reason they are still standing here, is because collaboration internally in the country and between countries that are assisting them in this difficult time. We can learn from that. I am certain that there's a different situation when you are at war than it is when you are at peace. Again, they have been at war since the annexation of Crimea in 2014. So they are used to this situation. We need to learn from them. Because if we are prepared for war, it's very easy to live in peace. And I think that's an experience that they can share and that we can take to us. So again, I really urge everyone to support Ukraine. Whatever you can do, that is an action that you can be proud of in the future. And that we make sure that they don't get forgotten now, since the war seems to become protracted. And it will last longer than at least the Russians expected. We hope for a quick ending, but as long as it goes on, I really hope that Sweden will support Ukraine. Thank you.